Good morning, everyone. My name is Teresa Poole, and I have the honor of being your worship associate today. We want to welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Roanoke, and we want to extend a special welcome if you're joining us for the first time. We hope that you will stay after the service for coffee in the fellowship hall. And let's take a second. We've got some people joining us online, but if you'll turn around and wave, and that way we can connect with them as well. For those of you who are online, if you wish to share any joys or concerns during the Lifelines part of the service, please put those in the chat in the next 15 minutes. We all, especially today, we want to acknowledge that our church resides on traditional lands of the Tutelo and Monacan Indians and was later farmed and developed with slave labor. We recognize and respect the ongoing connection to this land by generations of Black and Indigenous people. And may our gratitude and fellowship here echo and honor that rich history. Our contract minister is the Reverend Kirk Ballin. He's also our minister emeritus. Reverend Walter LaFleur is now our retired minister. Let us take a minute to send good thoughts to him. While Reverend Kirk is not in the pulpit this week, although he is with us today, today's guest speaker is our very own Betsy Biesenbach. And I wanted to share a little information about Betsy. She is the leader of our AV team, a member of the choir, and the connections team. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Radford University in English and Radio and Television Communications. She also had a minors in Spanish and History. Her family is from Texas, but she traveled all over the world with them when she was a child. She settled in Roanoke in 1981 and thinks this is the best place she's ever lived and considers it her home. And I agree 100% with you. She's worked as a DJ, a sound engineer, and a television camera operator, and also as a paralegal for a local law firm. In the past 40 years, we just did that. She is the author of 3 self-published books, and the most recent one, Say My Name, The Story of Amanda Jeffers, Roanoke County, 1864. That book won a Roanoke Preservation Foundation Award in 2022, and the book is available after today's service. Betsy has combined both careers into her hobby, which is researching and writing about local history. And those of us who are lucky enough to catch the articles in our own Roanoke Times tremendously enjoy her writing. She did retire in December of last year and hopes to spend her time doing more research with an emphasis on Roanoke's Black community as an anti-racism project. Betsy, she's one of the long-termers at UU. She's been attending church here for 38 years, and she always swore that she would never get behind the pulpit. Because everyone says she talks too fast. She seems to be able to slow down when she's talking about her research, but if she speeds up, she asks that you do not call her out because she has planted some people that will clue her in, give her signals that she needs to slow down. Today, she's going to be talking with us about the history of the land that this church owns. This ain't our land, we just think it is. Okay. We're going to do the words of welcome. Okay. The words of welcome, and if you'll please join me in reciting those, they're projected. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you express your identity, whatever your situation in life, whatever your experience of the holy. Here is the gift. Whether you're filled with sadness or overflowing with joy, needing to be alone with yourself, or eager to engage others, all who welcome all are welcome here. And our covenant, we commit to supporting each other with respect and direct communication as we work in community to explore spiritual growth and to be a force for good in the world.
Good morning. There I am. Good morning. I am so happy to be here today, so thank you all for having me. This is a song called Tumblin' Stone. Author unknown, I learned it from a friend. Enjoy.
Flow, flow, flow.
the sea. Flow, 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 the river flow into the sea.
Our opening words today, and I got these from the Monica Museum website. It's a reading from the PBS series Life in the Heartland, and this episode was about the Monacan Indian Nation. There is a close-knit community of Monacan descendants that are centered in our nearby Amherst County, where their ancestors lived long before the area was settled by Europeans. The Monacan people are an amazing story of survival, according to Jeffrey Hantman, who's Professor Emeritus in the Department of Anthropology at UVA. The presence of Monacans dates back to more than 10,000 years in the Mid-Atlantic region. Their original territory actually covered more than half of present-day Virginia. And unlike the Algonquin-speaking people who first encountered English settlers at Jamestown, scholars believe the Monacans actually migrated east from the Ohio River Valley. Today, the Monacan Nation consists of 2,600 members, both inside and outside of the realm of education. Prejudice against Native Americans was reinforced statewide in 1924 with the passage of the Racial Integrity Act. It's a Virginia statute that sought to draw clear lines between white and non-white. A present-day Monacan, Bertha Riley, and she is on their tribal council, is quoted as describing bringing her birth certificate to a new job and having to explain why she was classified as a Negro. There's a quote from her that we're not talking about things that happened 100 years ago or 200 years ago. We're talking about things that are still happening. But pride in their heritage persisted, and in the past decade, the Monacans have worked alongside other Native American nations in Virginia to seek recognition from the federal government. And in 2018, Congress passed the federal act that recognized 6 Native American communities as sovereign tribes in Virginia, including the Monacan Nation. And for the chalice lighting, we have a reading from our hymnal. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom, we strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home. And we have projected the response. We're going to do the chalice lighting. Kay, would you do the lighting? May the light not to hinder, not to hinder.
Hello, hello. My name is Jessie McEwen. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Director of Lifespan Faith Development here. And as young folks and those young at heart, I don't have pictures today, so you don't need to worry about getting too close. You can go ahead and come forward. You guys can come and join me if you want. I want to publicly thank Kathy Overholzer for this fancy nude storytelling chair. It's really cool that she was shopping and she thought of you guys and thought that you guys deserve a fancy new chair for me to sit in and talk to you. So Kathy bought this chair for us. Can we give her a little round of applause? And it's gorgeous. So today, I want to talk about something that you guys see and hear, and perhaps even join in saying every single Sunday. Did you see the slide that had the beautiful picture of the fall colors on the mountains, and it had a bunch of words on it that talked about a bunch of different things? The Tutelo and Monacan nations talked about slave labor. Do you guys remember that slide? Yeah. Oh, it's up there. Oh, look at you. Thank you, Lynn. I didn't even ask for that. Lynn's on top of it, didn't she? So we're going to break that down a little bit. If I was to say that I'm acknowledging something, what do you think that means? What you got? You notice it and mention it. Yes, that's a great answer. Say thank you. Yes, acknowledgments are sometimes, if you look in a program of perhaps a dance recital that's happening today, if you look in there and there's acknowledgments, that's usually, hey, these people did something pretty awesome, and we're going to say thank you to them. We're going to mention them, and we're going to notice them. What does it mean that our church resides on traditional lands? Hit me. It was built on top of that land. So this land was the traditional land of the Tutelo and Monacan nations. Now, I have it on good authority, which is extensive research, that nobody really lived in Roanoke that much. They would come here and meet each other, but it was hard land to live on. Any ideas why? What you got? Well, even before slaves fixed the problem with it being hard to live on, when you drive around Roanoke, is everything straight, or do you kind of do this a little bit? It's curves and it's up and downy and all those different things. Do you think it's easy to build a house on, or it's easy to even put up a tent or even find trees to hang a hammock between when the hill is like this? Yeah, no. So if we wanted to find a place to live in our in our houses and all these big buildings, do you think it would be easy for us to find a place to live when it's all rocky and twisty and salty? Do you think animals could live here, though? Yeah, so what do you think the Tutelo and Monacan nations did around here? Yeah, they hunted. So they would meet each other here because there's enough flat places where they can have meetings. But people didn't permanently live here that often. But if we say it was farmed and developed through slave labor, what do you think that means? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that in the microphone. Once people came and took the land, folks that probably looked a lot like me came and took the land and kicked some people off the land. They also brought in slaves, people who, do you think they looked like me? No. What do you think slaves looked like? Mexican. What else? They look like they haven't gotten much good food. Yeah. They're not being treated good enough. Where in the world do you think, skin and bones, where in the world do you think slaves came from? All over. Majority of slaves in Virginia came from Africa or the Caribbean. So they were most likely black, right? So they are the ones that people who looked like me said, fix this land so I can live on it and I can farm on it. Do you think they were successful? Yeah. They were hard workers. They were good workers. Well, were they loyal or were they obedient? Yeah, because they were slaves, and we'll talk a little more about that too. So if we, all the people in this church, want to remember that, and we want to remember that without the work of people that had to do the work to earn their food, and people before that who owned this place, and this land was theirs, if we want to acknowledge that, which we know what it means, can we recognize and respect them? Can we recognize and respect that they have a connection to this land that we may not feel? Awesome. So that's what we do in the mornings. When we say all of these things, we're saying we understand that this was not a pretty way to get this land, right? It was a hard way for us to get this land. We acknowledge that and we respect that. And we also say that there's a rich history here, because if you look at these folks, stand up and look at them. Make it look so hard that it feels a little weird. These people have so much knowledge, and they have learned so much that they can tell you even more about the rich history of this area. So if you ever want to ask them a question, will you guys answer? Awesome. Thank you. We're going to head upstairs. We're going to talk a little bit more about this connection to the land, because we're studying the Appalachians this summer. And then we're going to listen to a ghost story.
Our reading today, Betsy selected, and it reinforces many of the things that Jesse was just describing about our topography. It's from the diary written by a group of Moravians who left Pennsylvania on October 8th, 1753, in a wagon, and they were headed for Winston-Salem. They arrived on November 17th, 1753, and the group passed through the Roanoke Valley along what would become US 220. They crossed the Roanoke River at present-day Franklin Road, and parts of the diary will sound familiar as they talk about early Roanoke. November 2nd, we rose early, having slept little because the smoke troubled us all night. At daybreak, we crossed the Roanoke, which was very low but full of slippery stones, and in high water it runs half a mile over the banks. We had much difficulty getting our sick horses across. A quarter mile beyond, we came to Evans Mill, where our road turned to the left and became very narrow. A mile further, we came to a steep hill, and the road sloped badly. We were soon stuck in a ditch. In another mile, a rather high hill rose before us, and we had to unload half of our things and carry them up on our backs. And even then, we could hardly get the wagon up. The going down was also steep. We locked 2 wheels, hung a tree behind, and all the brethren held it back. At last in the valley, we found a little creek. There we made camp as best we could, having much trouble to get a fire since it was raining heavily and everything was wet. We set up the tent and lay close together on the wet bedding. November 3rd, we rejoiced that the Savior had helped us, although there were a couple of steep, sloping hills before us. We crossed them before night and set up our tent. Turning our horses into the woods, we were very tired and sleepy, and let the angels be our guard that night. And now, our Betsy Biesenbach.
Is it good? That's good. See if I know how to use this thing every Sunday. I complain people don't use it right, and here I am. Anyway, I'm keeping my promise. I'm not behind the pulpit. I'm behind this music stand, so I can look at the slides, and Lynn is going to put them up there and advance them for me. A while back, Bill Hapcork gave us talk about the congregation itself, and which is really good. But I'm talking about our land, and the land, story of the land is for the people who were on it, so you'll hear about that. And it's not a pretty story. We're here because of a genocide. The Native peoples were actually killed so that we could have this land. And so it's, you can hear some things that probably get a little uncomfortable while I'm here. Next slide, please, Lynn. We show this one every Sunday to remind us to honor the Native people that were here and also the enslaved people. But I'm going to begin with the story of the Europeans because I don't feel like I'm competent to talk about the native peoples, not being one of them. We don't want to gloss over what happened to them here, but maybe someone could come later on and really do a good job of telling their story. Next slide, please, Lynn. Oh, that's the one I want. Okay. For most of its history, this part of Virginia was considered too wild and remote for European-type settlements. And so the Europeans mostly left it alone, as Jesse said earlier. The first European explorers came here in 1671, and they found a friendly, peaceful group of people called the Tutelo or the Tortera. And they shared a culture with the Monacans. They were the same language group and the same kind of outlook on things. And of course, the Monacans are still here in Virginia. The Tutelo lived on the edge of a swamp that would one day become Roanoke City, and their village was at the old viscose plant. If you know where that is in Southeast, that's where they lived. And there was a second settlement near, we're a slide ahead, I'm sorry, Lynn. And then another settlement was there in Salem near Mill Lane. And as Jesse mentioned, this area is often talked about as the hunting ground that no one lived on. But the Monacans actually came through here, and they would cultivate crops once in a while. They'd have some patches of crops that they could harvest when they were here. And most importantly, they curated the land. They would burn it on purpose. They would do deliberate burns to create meadows for the animals to come and graze. And if you've heard of a subdivision called the Barrens in North Roanoke County, that subdivision sits on one of the old meadows they created. So some of them are still there, the remnants of these meadows. So they made the meadows for the animals to come and eat, and also the salt licks were here. Roanoke was at one time a big ocean with salt underneath it. When it dried, the licks were there. And those salt licks gave the town its first name, which was Big Lick. And Roanoke was the name for the shell money the natives used to exchange with each other. That's how that name came out. So anyway, let's see. Next thing. I think that we're on slide 4. Next one. Lynn, if you don't mind. Yeah. This is a map of the Indian tribes where they were. And the Catawba, I think, were actually a little further south. That they weren't really quite this close to us. But when the European settlers came in the early 18th century, excuse me, most of the Tutelos had moved on because the Cherokees, who lived very close, they lived on the New River, and they also lived on the North Fork of the Roanoke River, and they were very warlike, and the Tutelos did not want to get involved in that. They moved north, and of course the Europeans pressed them out too. As the eastern part of the state got all settled up, people wanted to move west to get more land. And of course, a lot of people came down, the Scots-Irish came down from Pennsylvania, down what is now Route 220. It's still the major north-south route from Pennsylvania to North Carolina, and they came down that way. So a lot of pressure was put on the Tutelos, and they moved out of the area. Of course, there was a lot of interaction with the Cherokees. The Cherokees were not as friendly, and the Europeans and the Cherokees had quite a few conflicts and a lot of bloodshed, and that's unhappy, but that's what happened. That red dot on the map shows where Roanoke was about the same time. So, the Europeans came here to trade goods such as knives and blankets and beads and guns for furs, which are very much in demand in Europe and in the United States. And if you ever gone to Pop's Ice Cream for a snack, that's the site of one of our earliest trading posts that's around here. It was really, yeah. And the guy that owned it was called Irwin Patterson. And Patterson Avenue in West End is named for him and his family. And Irwin Patterson came here, and they told him how to interact with the native people so as not to violate their cultural norms, how to get along with them and trade with them nicely. But Irwin, instead of doing that, he started fooling around with the chief's wife and then beat the chief up when he didn't like that. So he wasn't much of a good ambassador for the settlers. He got run out of here on a rail pretty much. So anyway, the next slide. These days, if you purchase a piece of land, you get a deed in return. And back then, what you got was a patent. And these were granted from the king through the royal governor. In this case, would have been King George II. And what happened was he would give just thousands of acres, the king would, to his loyal subjects, and then they could break it up to smaller properties. And this patent lets you take this thing, find a surveyor, and stake out what you wanted, wherever the acreage was that you're granted. And a lot of times these patents were rewards for service in the French and Indian War or in the Revolutionary War. This isn't a local patent. It's just one that I found online that looks very much like what would have happened here. And I believe it's signed by the royal governor, but it mentions the king, that the king had said, this is how we're going to do this. And you took a surveyor and took an axe, and they just marked off your boundaries, and there you were. Let's see. And the first patent in Roanoke County was granted to, in 1740, to James McAfee. Is that name familiar to you all? McAfee's Knob in Catawba still has his name. So that was James. It was 300 acres in that area. And so next slide, please. The first settler to come there, the church, was named William Terry. This is his property. And our church is the red dot, and I have 2 yellow dots. I'm not sure what that is, but see where the red dot is? That's where our church would have been in his property. And it was quite a big bit of land. Over there where the green dot is where Evergreen Cemetery is. And the 2 yellow dots, the one on the right is where the public radio station, TV station is, WBRA, up on the campus of the community college. That right-hand yellow dot is there. And the left-hand yellow dot, for reference, I think some of y'all have heard about the caretaker's house in Fishburne Park. Well, you're probably not alone. I'm sorry. I'll try again. But the dot on the left is where the caretaker's cabin is now. That was built a century later. That wasn't part of William Terry's land. But he was the first European settler to own, as we say, the land our church is on. And his choice of properties was really kind of strange because as one of the first people here to get a property, most people wanted a property on the river. The roads, as you heard and what Teresa read, were terrible. And so if you were on the river, that's where you wanted to be. You could get some kind of barge or something down. And back in those days, there was more water in that river. And you could get a barge down if you wanted to, something. But he didn't get property on the river. And his property actually, let's see, I guess we're next slide, Lynn. This is the modern day aerial map. This is showing Fishburne Park. And I have WBRA right there, like I was talking about, in Fishburne Park. And the red dot up there is the church. Where it says Shrine Hill is where the high school is. But anyway, so down the right-hand side, it says Carolina Road. That's Colonial Avenue. And that was the road that went right past the community college property, went to the Carolinas. And so his property was kind of close to that road, which was a pretty good choice. But what he chose to do is build his house on Murray's Run. And what you see, it says Black River Run. Is that in there? Yeah, Black Run River, yeah. They didn't know when they got here what was a river, what was a creek, so they thought they were all rivers. And so Murray's Run at that time was called Black Run River. And he chose to put his house there. And I'm not sure why, because you saw how bad the roads were. There were no roads there. Bamberville Avenue wasn't even built. It wasn't there. He could maybe walk along the creek bed to get places. That might have been good. And apparently he built a mill on that property and ground corn. And I'm guessing that you've been to Fishburne Park on our church picnics. And I'm guessing that Murray's Run had more water in it then, too, because I don't see how you could run a mill from there. But apparently he did. And that's where he lived. The other thing he might have wanted the property for was the middle school nearby, Woodrow Wilson. It was the site of an iron mine back in the colonial days. And he may have thought Shrine Hill, which is behind the high school, that big rock outcropping, may have had some minerals he might have wanted. That might have been a reason for moving there. Otherwise, I really can't figure out what he wanted to do there. Anyway, next slide, please. And this is a map from the early 19th century, and that shows his house right there. The red dot is the church, approximately. It's a very big scale here. And again, I did 2 yellow dots, don't know why. But the right-hand yellow dot is WBRA, TV station is off Colonial Avenue. And the left-hand yellow dot is where his house was, and I assume his mill was close to there. And the green dot is where the caretaker's house is in Fishburne Park. So you can get an idea what's going on there. Anyway, let's see. He was born in New Jersey or Pennsylvania in 1724, and he came here by 1740, and he was appointed a constable, which sort of a law officer of the peace, but also had to do with parsing the land out. One thing that he did, he supplied horses for the county militia during the French and Indian Wars. He fought with General Andrew Lewis's company against the French and the native peoples they were displacing. So he had that as background. During the Revolutionary War, he might have been a Tory. I saw something saying that he was on the side of the British during the war, but he changed sides apparently. And he enlisted as a member of the Home Guard. And the Home Guard was people too young or too old to actually go fight. They stayed at home and took care of what was going on here. Not much was happening here, really. The real, most of the fighting went on the New River. You've heard of Mary Ingalls and the Draper Valley, that place. That's where most of the fighting went on here. But he was in the Home Guard because he was aged, being over 50. He was too old to be a regular soldier. So anyway, and according to the militia musters, he held at least one person in bondage. I wasn't able to get to the courthouse and see if he had other enslaved people, but I'm pretty sure he had at least one enslaved person, and I don't know who that was because they didn't keep those kind of records back then. He died in 1792 at age 68, and his wife Ruth predeceased him. They left 8 children and a number of grandchildren behind. Next slide, please, Lynn. These are the Persinger properties, and when Terry's estate was settled in 1804, his heirs conveyed most of his property to John Persinger. The name is familiar to you, I'm sure, because Persinger Road is near here. And you might not know that the alley behind our property across the street is called Persinger Lane. It's got an official name, it's Persinger Lane, because you could get back and forth between the houses that way. And anyway, John Persinger's first home was near the Dollar Tree store on Brandon Avenue, if you know where that is. He lived on a cabin near that Dollar Tree store. And when he bought the Terry land, he built a cabin in the Center Hill neighborhood just up behind the high school up on the hill, if you know where that Center Hill is. Before he died, he sold his land to his sons. Not surprised my friend Catherine here, because most people will, you die, you give them to your children. But he made his kids pay for these properties. So he did. And the oldest got mill property. It's on the map. It's way up there. I didn't mark it. But if you're ever on the new section of Greenway, the Bridge the Gap section that is opened, that's where the old mill was. And if you can get in the water, you can see the old end of the mill race from back about 1835. It's there. It's a secret that only I know. So that's with that first piece. The second son got the property on Colonial Avenue. The third son got the property further to the north, but James Persinger, the youngest, he got the most land, but his property was in the middle of nowhere. There were no big waterways. There were no roads. He just got this land. And he also got most of the enslaved people because, of course, he couldn't run this land without people working for him for free. And between them, the Persingers owned about 24 people. So, but James Persinger's the yellow circle here, and the church is the yellow dot, if you see where we're related to it here. Let's see. John Persinger, before he died, the kind of slaveholder he was, I found a case in the court records about one person he had enslaved, and this person apparently kept escaping. And if you did that often enough, the penalty was often death. And so this man was in front of the court, and John Persinger pled for his life, but it wasn't altruistic. He got the charge converted just to life. It was not to live, the man was. But what he did was he sold this man in the Caribbean, West Indies, the sugarcane plantations. And of course, the worst thing you could do generally to somebody was to sell them further south, away from their families. And of course, conditions in the deep south were worse than they were here. But he sold this man to the West Indies, where he had a very short life, I'm sure, working in the sugarcane fields. So his saving this man's life was not for altruistic reasons. He just was worth more to him alive than he was dead, because he could sell them to the slaveholders in the West Indies. So that's the kind of person he was. And I didn't catch the man's name, though. I couldn't find the case after a while. But anyway, the next slide, please, Lynn. Yeah. This is a map, a Civil War map of the area. The yellow dot's the church. And as you can see, there's still no big roads over here. Brandon wasn't thought of. Grandin wasn't thought of. Grandin is the extension of the old Garce Mill Road. There was no Garce Mill was there, but they didn't have the road extended this far at the point. These were the farmlands. And so that's about where the church was at that time. Most of the Civil War, Roanoke wasn't touched by it. Nothing much happened here. One guy died near Hanging Rock. Otherwise, there wasn't much happening. But several of John Persinger's grandsons served in the war, and some of them died. And they're buried at a cemetery. If you've seen it at the corner of Edgewood Street and Memorial Avenue, that's the William Persinger Cemetery, and some of his sons are buried there. Okay, next slide, please. Because James's house was in the middle of nowhere, it's still there. If you drive up to the corner of Hunters Road and Persinger Road, you'll see this house from the 1850s. His brother William's house is under a factory, and his brother Jacob's house was on the community college property, just fell in, and nobody took care of it. But James's house is still there. Okay, then the next slide, please. Through my research, I found the names of 15 people that were enslaved on this property. Their enslavers' names came after here. Jacob's enslaved people, and James, which is our property, and William, one of the sons, and John. I'm sorry, John was the father. Those are John's enslaved people in his will, and then everybody else that they owned. I've highlighted the last names here, the Jeffers family. This is a family of father, mother, son, and 2 daughters. And what you can see here is the family was split up between the brothers. And I don't know if this for sure, but I got a feeling the brothers didn't like the way the lands were apportioned. They wanted to make sure these enslaved people were apportioned them equally. And so James had the mother Vina and the daughter Ellen, and Jacob got Amanda and Albert, and then William had the oldest son, which is Washington. So they were luckier than some families. They were split up, but they were close enough to see each other, I suppose, when they could. But they were still split up. And Amanda was a year old when her mother died, and she was sent over to Jacob's farm. One of these men here, 2 of them, the Merritt and George Leftridge, lift up here. George Leftridge and Merritt were sent to dig ditches for the war effort in the Civil War. And George Leftridge had a large family of children and a wife across the river in Highland Park that I suppose he got to visit maybe on Sundays. He was separated from his wife, too, by the river. All the people who later on went on to be the movers and shakers of Roanoke, who found this city and made it all work, they were very wealthy men because of the labor of these people. They would not have been able to be rich without the free labor here. And I know that it was a bad thing for the people who were enslaved, but they didn't own the property, but they developed it, made it what it was. And I've been trying to give a way to honor these people. I wish we could put their names out someplace in the garden. I'm full of good ideas. If you can help me, do something with the idea, that'd be great. I'm not really good at follow through, but I'd like to see us honor them in some way, because we know that they were here. We know their names. And it's unusual to have people's actual names. I ran across a list from the Freedmen's Bureau after the Civil War. It was important to establish these marriage bonds, and because that legal things like inheritance, property inheritance, and things like that, they had to be legally declared married. And this is how they did it with these lists. I found the people on these lists here. Yes, if anybody wants to help me out with doing something here to recognize these people. Nearly every park in the city is the site of a former plantation. And we say plantation here. We have very few of those, ones, the magnolia and honey ones with big amounts of people, but there were all at least 3 people enslaved on each property. People say here that slavery wasn't important. Well, it was. They say, people had just one slave and they worked with them alongside them, so it wasn't wasn't that big deal. But that's really not the case. Most people had 2 or 3 people enslaved, and just having one enslaved person could make you a person of leisure. The land here was so rugged that you couldn't farm at all. So just one enslaved person, then you were set. So they were very important to our economy, and people tend to forget that sometimes, how important they were. Anyway, next slide, please, Lynn. When James Persinger died in 1880, in 1906, his heirs sold 106 acres of their property, including the church site, to Burger Brosius Dillard Sr. And his friends called him BB. That probably was a good thing. He owned several farms, a livery stable, and a tavern on Kimball Avenue. And he came to a very suspicious end on December 14th, 1909. He was holding a pistol discharged. The only witness was his brand new wife, Nanny, and he married her just weeks before. And She was the only witness, and they had a private inquest at his property because they wanted to make sure everyone knew it wasn't a suicide. They want to make sure that wasn't, but it's very suspicious that he and Nanny were there and he holding the gun, but that's his story. Anyway, he didn't have the property very long. Next slide, please. 6 months later, he sold it to the Metropolitan Land Corporation, which divided up into lots, and the yellow square there is where the church was. It was 7 lots facing Grandin Road, which was at that time put through to Memorial to Brandon at that point. They put the road through when they developed it finally. You'll see here the streetcar line. They proposed to have it running right through Grandin Road. People use that a lot, and there was proposed at the time. One thing you'll notice here is the street names don't match the current ones, if you can see that. Brandon Avenue, which is only 3.5 blocks long. It didn't go all the way through to Edgewood like it does today. Brandon was Lincoln, Carter was called Liberty, Belleville was Paris, Laburnum was Roosevelt, and Avenel was Fillmore Avenue. And then on the other side of Brandon, Carter Road changed to Grant Street. And if you're wondering how that happened here in the South, the company who divided this place was registered in Chautauqua, New York. So they were Yankees that came down here and laid this out. And they would do this. It was a really big real estate boom at the beginning of the last century. And they'd make these maps. And they were someplace flat and didn't realize you couldn't put a street here and there. They laid it out anyway. Next slide, please. In 1910, the Raleigh Corporation bought this from the Metropolitan Land Corporation, and all the streets were renamed for English manor houses. Belleville and Avenel, these are all English manor houses that they put the streets for. It isn't on the map, but all the alleys had names so that live-in servants would have different addresses than the landowners. That was very important to them that they not know that their servants live with them. I think the alley behind our property is not there anymore. It's been closed off. It was called Ivy. I think that's what the name of it. So your servants would be like, number 21 Ivy Lane, while you'd be, number 45 Grandin Road. The streetcar line is shown there. By this time, the streetcar line was in operation, and it ran from about the early teens until 1948, and from here to downtown. And that's why people lived here. This is too far away to live if you didn't have a horse and carriage, but the streetcar line, people were able to live here. It was considered a new, wonderful subdivision for, rich people, but it wasn't. It was more like middle management kind of people with the railroad who lived here. So anyway, one of the things here on the map, you'll see that it says Shrine Temple property. That was the Shriners. That's the Patrick Henry High School property. And the Shriners bought that property across the street, and they were going to build a big temple and have all kinds of things, a pool and casino, all kinds of stuff. But in 1920s, sometime they moved downtown. If you notice, there's that building with the kid in the statue and the Shriner and the Fez, and it's on Campbell Avenue near I don't know what it's near now. The buildings have closed, but it's on Campbell Avenue. They moved there. But the area is still known as Shrine Hill, even though they have been gone for a long time. There's a Shrine Street across the road, and everyone calls it that. So anyway, next slide, please. In 1912, a woman named Janie Dinwiddie bought that property, and she was single, which is interesting that a single woman would buy this property. She built a house worth about $10,000 on the lot where the classrooms are, in that area where our classrooms and offices are. She bought that lot. And of course, these lots were mostly bought as investments. They weren't really residences, they just made investments. And every deed from the Raleigh Corporation, the deeds included these restrictions that you'll see up here. No portion of the land shall be hereinafter sold, conveyed, or leased to any Negro or Syrian. And that surprises some of you. I'm talking too fast. If it surprises some of you, wrap it up. Right, okay, I will go faster. Anyway, the Syrians, if you know anything about Roanoke, there was a big Lebanese population, reverse of them. So, and also there was also Greeks, and they were often included too. These restrictions expired in 1931, but they're nullified by the Fair Housing Act of 1968, so they're no longer, of course, any good. All right, next. Janie was a secretary of the Virginia Candy Company, and she married her boss at age 45. Her name was William Baldwin, and he became one of the founders of the Baldwin-Felts Detective Agency. And they, of course, were notorious for being involved in the Matewan Massacre in West Virginia. Next slide, please, Lynn. J.D. Dinwiddie sold property to George Payne, and he re-subdivided the lots. There were 3 lots facing the road instead of 7 small ones. He was an investor. He never lived here, and they were sold off separately, never used as residences. Next slide, please. One of his sons was the Hollywood actor John Payne. He was in Miracle on 42nd Street, among other films, so he probably was here on the property. He didn't live here, but, you know, it's the connection. Next slide, please, Lynn. One of the owners was the Yost Huff Company, and they sold farm implements, but they also one of the first automobile dealers in town. They sold Ford and Warren Detroit vehicles at their showroom in Church Avenue. And again, this was just a investment property, and they bought this property in 1928. Next slide, please. This is Ruth Cohen. She bought the lot in 1935, and she was a member of Temple Emmanuel, and she's buried in Beth Israel Cemetery. She owned a millinery business, and she might have felt very at home in our church since the kind of parties she attended. Here's a guy in the back wearing a tutu, so I think that Ruth was our kind of a gal. And I'm surprised that she was able to buy the property because most of these restrictions wouldn't allow Jews to buy property either. So, by the time they expired, so I guess it didn't apply to her. Next slide. Another owner was Fred Kunk, and he owned this market. I'm sure you all are familiar with this, on the corner of Carter and Brandon. He owned that too. And next slide, please. The parking lot property was purchased by the Women's Club of Roanoke in 1953. This club was founded in 1905 as Women's Civic Betterment League, and they had a big part of bringing sanitation, schools, and public parks to Roanoke. And one of their biggest jobs is cleaning up the filthy market house. This was the meat market, and they just sold meat, no refrigeration. Meat was out there, flies, what have you, and they cleaned it up. And they were also in charge of censoring movies and plays they felt were off color. And the members were the wives and daughters of the most important men in town, generally. In 1923, the group became the Women's Club of Roanoke after it merged with the Chamber of Commerce, and their power was just diminished. Their job was to teach kids to be patriotic, and later on they did handicrafts. And they sold the parking lot property, in 1958. And next slide, please. Here's our building. In 1945, the 2 building lots the building is on were sold to 8 representatives of the Mormon Church. And they bought the parking lot in 1958. They bought the buildings in 45, the parking lot in 58, and the 3 lots across the street in 1963. And one of them was named Joseph Smith, but I'm guessing he wasn't that Joseph Smith. So next slide, please. In 1985, all the properties were sold to the trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Roanoke. And what this shows is in 2006, churches were no longer held by trustees, they were corporations. This is our last group of trustees: Helen Goody-Kuntz, Walter Lawson, Henry Woodward, and Angela Ravenswinter. They conveyed the property to the corporation. Now it's held as a corporation. And every few decades we talk about relocating our church, but we probably will be here for a while for a number of factors. So we owe it to the people who've had it before us to treat it well. And next slide, please. And that's basically the story of our property. Here's the cover of the book. If you want one, I'll be in the back. This is about Amanda, the little girl I mentioned earlier. And if you have questions, I'll be in the back too. Sorry it took so long. Okay, thank you.
That was really wonderful. All these places that you've driven around and now you have an understanding of it. It was wonderful. The ushers are bringing up the collection now.
That was really great, Betsy. Thank you. I'm Jane Harrison from the Caring Committee. If you have a joy or a concern you wish to share with the congregation, you can inform the, the office, or you can inform a member of the Caring Committee, or we have our Lifelines book, which we keep on the pulpit on Sunday morning. We presently don't have any joys or concerns at this point, but if you have a joy and a concern in your heart that you wish to share to lighting a candle, please come forward and we'll use both sides of the altar.
Somaya say Somaya say Soma say Soma say Soma yeah ma Soma say Kamavoria samovi Kamara samovi Somase, Soma, Somase, Soma, Somase.
May our prayers be heard and our hearts restored.
Okay, our announcements. There's a reminder from Susan that the water will be subject to interruption tomorrow from 9 to 3 p.m. Also, there is the Southwest Virginia Pride Fest is going, UUCR Pride Committee is going to be having a booth there. It will be on the 12th of October from 12 to 6 p.m. And they have 2 shifts and need volunteers to sign up for those. You can either see Grant Holly or Gordon Malcheski. And I'm not going to spell Gordon's name for you. You can just get that in the bulletin so that it's correct. Okay, a couple of other things too. We're having a potluck for Reverend Kirk on August 11th. We're hoping to be able to resume more social events like this. Just bring a dish for yourself and then some to share with others. It'll be immediately after the service. And I just want to thank everyone who made today's service possible, especially our guest speaker, our own Betsy Biesenbach. And Joy Truskowski's music was wonderful. And as usual, our AV team was great, Lynn Yates and James Rosar. Our greeter was Lydia Warner, and monitoring safely, Jim Overhauser, and ushers Chris Jordan and Grant Holly, and coffee, I want to thank Kay Brandt. Oh, I'm sorry, Trina Scott, yeah. Kay and I thought we were going to be doing it, but we had a few wires crossed. Okay. And we hope that you'll join us for coffee hour, and then we have a very special announcement. First of all, a reminder, our green team is having their monthly climate rally. It's going to be at 12:15 on the Grandin Road corner. And Kevin Perry, again, our very own Kevin Perry, has got a very special announcement for us.
Good morning, everybody. It's been a while since I've been up here. My name is Kevin Perry, and I'm excited to announce that this afternoon at 4 p.m., we will be presenting my show, The Velvet Cabaret, right here at our very own stage. The performance will feature a variety of dance styles, including jazz, musical theater, modern, comedy, holiday, tap, ballet, and more. You may arrive as early as 3:30 here in the sanctuary for our 4 p.m. show. We hope you can join us this afternoon for this fantastic entertainment and to support our passionate young dancers. Thank you so much.
Okay, Joy.
All right, this is a song called Stone by Stone, and I invite you to sing along. It repeats a lot, so, and it's beautiful.
doom, 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 doom. Stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here what is gone. We build upon, stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here what is gone. We build upon, stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here what is gone. We build upon, stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here what is gone. We build upon, stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here what is gone. We build upon, stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here what is gone. We build upon, stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here what is gone. We build upon, stone by stone.
One more.
Tear by tear,
They want to keep singing.
release and create right here what is gone. We build upon.
Our benediction today, Betsy selected it. It's number 700 in our hymnal. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. For all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. May we go into our week in peace, and may the light of the chalice go with us.